Welcome to the Health Catalyst podcast, brought to you by YPO. Here we talk about the business of health innovation, and I sit down with industry leaders who have been in the trenches. My goal is to share the lessons and provide practical and actionable advice to help you launch, grow, and scale your business. I am your host, Rodrigo Hute. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. Today, my guest is Webb Sun. Webb is the president and co-founder of Komodo Health, a health technology company offering data analytics solutions to help companies in the health industry to have a complete view of their patients. Webb, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Rodrigo.
All right, so let's jump right in. We want to learn more about what you have built over the years. Komodo has had a successful journey. So tell us a little bit about the company and what were the specific challenges that motivated you to start the company?
Super, thanks. I'll start with my co-founder, Dr. Arif Nathu, and we started the company, founded it back in Q4 2014. And I think the biggest observation that we had was we had both spent and have spent the entirety of our careers in healthcare and life sciences. And what we observed was just a real gap when it came to leveraging technology, leveraging emerging technology capabilities in order to better understand disease, better understand patient costs and outcomes for the healthcare system. And everything was very manual, very, very time consuming, very expensive. And so we said to ourselves, what if we created a company operating at the intersection of data and technology to really help support analysis of patient costs and outcomes, disease, et cetera. And so what we created was Komodo Health. What we've created is Komodo Health. Komodo Health is a health tech company. We've built a platform that is the new standard for real-world data and analytics that pairs the industry's most complete view of patient encounters with technology, including artificial intelligence that connects the dots between individual patient journeys and large-scale health outcomes. And so when you think about healthcare across life sciences, payers, providers, Komodo is helping its partners unearth patient-centric insights at scale through the marrying of real-world data, real-time data, real-world evidence with advanced algorithms and AI-enabled software solutions to generate real-time insights informing decision-making, closing gaps in care, addressing disease burden, and helping enterprises create a more cost-effective, value-driven healthcare system.
Awesome. And over the years, has the vision and strategy evolved or changed in response to changes in the health industry? Or have you been focusing based on what you initially set out to do?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the full stack thesis of building a company that, invests in every layer of the tech stack, whether it's the data foundation, what we've trademarked as the healthcare map, whether it's the platform capabilities that bring together all of these different assets, whether it's the insights workflow. I think what we've seen is there's been market evolution at every layer of the stack. And correspondingly, it's created incredible opportunities for Komodo at every layer of the stack. And so when you think about it, what I mentioned up front, building a company that operates at the intersection of software and data, what we've seen on the technology side as an example, in the 10 years since inception, we've seen massive adoption of cloud. We've seen incredible advancements in compute. In the last, couple of years, we've seen enormous value being generated via Gen AI initiatives. And so that's been really exciting on the technology side. And then we've also seen corresponding evolution in the data ecosystem, more liquidity of data, better accessibility of data, more variety of data. I'm wearing my Whoop band here, right? Mm-hmm. You have folks that are saying, hey, how can wearables data, how can patient self-reported outcomes data help enable new use cases? How can social determinants of health data help unlock new insights and new use cases? And so the ability, the willingness and the ability to join together different types of data to unlock new analytics use cases. I think that's been really exciting. And then lastly, we've seen a lot of changes across our customer base. Our customers are much more willing to self-serve. Our customers are much more curious around the art of the possible, right? What's possible here? And I also think, in an era where everyone is being challenged to do more with less, to get smarter and more efficient, a lot of our customers are saying, hey, we have to get smarter. We have to figure out how do we capitalize on Gen AI, and we have to figure out how do we reduce our over-reliance and dependency on consultants. And so this has really created a lot of different dynamics that have allowed companies like Komodo to be successful in market.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned earlier a healthcare map, and my understanding is that it's the foundation of powering your technology.
That's right.
And your software. Could you describe your core products or core offerings in a little bit more of detail, just for us to better understand?
Absolutely. If you think about the frame for the inception of Komodo, this is 2014. At the time, what we saw was a lot of what we call kind of data naive software that was being deployed into market. And when I say data naive, you see a lot of, at the time I was like, ooh, cloud is going to be a big thing. Oh, we're going to have these systems of records and CRMs that you populate with your data and your analytics and your insights with your consultants. And what we said was, that is, an offering, but if we were able to bring that full stack thesis to bear, data, platform, insights, workflow solutions, all of a sudden you can accelerate the rate of innovation because your solutioning will come pre-populated with the best data, with the best insights, with the best recommendations for the end users. And so, going back to the healthcare map, broadly speaking, we've always treated our healthcare map as the lifeblood of our company, the engine powering our platform capabilities, and one of the many sources of differentiation. It's not the only source, but it is one of the sources of differentiation. And I think when you treat the healthcare map as a product, just like any other product, you're constantly identifying ways to improve it, assessing it for weaknesses, strategically addressing specific areas where new data can help generate additional important insights. And what you see today that's being pulled through our platform and being pulled through our workflow capabilities and workflow software is the culmination of 10 years of ongoing work. And it's still ongoing on the healthcare map, where we are now the leading platform for better understanding patient costs and outcomes, right? Through the tracking of those 330 plus million patients across every encounter with the healthcare system. That healthcare map, Komodo's healthcare map, is really providing a comprehensive understanding of medical, clinical, laboratory, and patient-level encounters with the healthcare system, which provides insights into diagnoses, treatments, outcomes, and so much more.
Data in the health industry, it's complicated. It's
Yes, it is.
It's siloed. It's unstructured sometimes. And there are a number of companies that I've seen over the years that they claim that they are also a healthcare data platform. Mm-hmm. So how does Komodo differentiate, versus other healthcare data platforms out there? And the second part of the question is, do you build a solution specific to a health system and you leverage their data, or do you go beyond a system and get access to data from other places and you make it available to every customer?
Great question. I would say this is an area that we've invested in heavily, because when it comes to data, to your point, there's a lot of claims that are being touted. And one of the things we talk about is all of your claims when it comes to data are very knowable. And so when we've talked about our platform capabilities, we've said to ourselves, okay, what are the kinds of things that our customers need to diligence when they're figuring out, do I use this company that claims to have a data platform, company B that also claims to have a data platform, company C that says we also track 330 million patients? the beauty of it is all of that is very knowable. And so via our platform capabilities, we've created the transparency and the ability for end users to define a cohort in real time and literally generate the traditional kind of counts of like, okay, I'm interested in multiple myeloma. This is the way I define that disease area. This is the way I think about the relevant patient cohort. And the beauty of it is, instead of going through that traditional approach of saying, hey, I'm going to go to my legacy aggregator, I'm going to go to my consultant, I'm going to ask them to talk to a bunch of people and figure out how many of those patients do they see, how many do they have, what is the depth that they have on those patients, how many encounters do they see for those patient populations. We realized these are the kinds of diligence assessments that our customers are doing. So we built that all into the platform. And so today, when we're in a demo, we don't use a demo environment. Everything is in production. So when you, Rodrigo, you say, hey, I want to understand, the GLP-1 category is something I'm very interested in. Weight loss is a very important category for the healthcare system and reducing costs over time. We say, fantastic. Let's do this on the fly. Tell us how you would define that category. Tell us what the market basket of drugs you would like included in that assessment. And then in real time, right in the platform, we run the query and we show you exactly what we have on those patients. What is the breadth? What is the depth? What is the longitudinality? What is the number of encounters we capture over a time series for a given time frame? All of that is completely knowable and seen right in the platform as we're working through it together. And it's really just, when you think about the velocity advantage that technology can bring to that kind of workflow, that's what we're really working through. And so, for us, we look at that as just an opportunity to, again, to further accelerate and shorten the timeline to insight for that specific kind of insights workflow that so many of our customers struggle with.
Yeah. It sounds very easy.
It's not easy.
It sounds very easy, but my next question is, what were the major challenges of building such a map? The healthcare map, you mentioned that you started with, as with any product, you have to keep iterating.
Yes.
But what have been the major challenges in building this comprehensive map?
That's a great question. And I'll say, when we talk to prospective investors, they say, I could just give another company some money and they can go and build the competitor to Komodo. And I always laugh because you say, it sounds easy. And I think about all of the lessons that we've learned over the course of this 10-year journey. And we've forgotten lessons that others would be, learning over that painful stretch. I think a couple things. One, when it comes to data, there's always going to be the general paranoia around, what if my data gets out? What if my data isn't secure? Is it being managed compliantly? And there's a lot of hesitancy to share that data with partners. And then you pair it with the fact that in this day and age, especially with Gen AI, everyone is saying, my data is gold, right? I have this data asset and I think it's incredibly valuable. I don't quite know how valuable it is, but I believe it's incredibly valuable. And as a result, every first-party data principal tends to start from a position of kind of holding on to their data very tightly and very carefully. I think for starters, we overcame some of this with our mission, right? Our mission as a company is to reduce disease burden through our own work and through the work that we execute on with our partners. I think the model itself is very important. There's a difference between legacy data aggregators that say, Rodrigo, you gave me this data. Now I'm going to turn it around and sell it, that exact asset, to 10 other parties. Whether or not you transact data, raw data in market, is a very important distinction. I think the solutions themselves are very important because Komodo, as a technology first company that's powered by data, is bringing to bear new capabilities that so many of our end users and customers find valuable. And then you put all of that together, the added bonus is that we work in a de-identified data construct. And so that creates another layer of abstraction for the folks that are sharing their assets into our platform for analysis.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes total sense. And, in terms of product development, and, I was asking you about how you build this core offering, but what have you learned over the years, in terms of product development and innovation, and in particular, like how does Komodo, prioritize new products, new features? There's always something going on. Everybody's like chasing shiny objects,
Yes.
as young
Yes.
companies. So, do you guys have a framework, or what have you learned in terms of how to prioritize and what to focus on in terms of building new products?
Absolutely. I think when you think about what we're doing at Komodo, there's a blessing and a curse. The blessing is truly through analyzing the healthcare map, through creating these ever improving platform capabilities, you truly can answer almost any question related to the healthcare system, related to patient costs, related to patient outcomes. And so that's both a blessing and a curse, right? Because what you're trying to do is build platform capabilities, build products that your end customers can use in a repeatable, scalable, durable way. And so if you really boil it down, we always start with what are our customers trying to solve for? As we've built out the platform and the myriad use cases where the platform can be pointed at, we start with what insights are missing? What pain points are being felt today? I broadly use that example of all the workflows just to figure out how do you define this disease and then what does each partner have? That's just one example of a pain point in that workflow process. But through the leveraging of the vast real world data that Komodo is collecting in real time and analyzing in real time, we're able to identify trends, inefficiencies, areas where new features or tools can create value. And so I'll give you a very simple example. This half, we launched Map AI. Map AI is an example of a product that emerged by looking at customers' needs, looking at what kinds of insights they were working through, what kind of problems they were trying to figure out, and aligning that with Komodo's innovation efforts. And so as Komodo's newly launched AI analytics assistant, Map AI is a first of its kind offering specifically designed to optimize multi-user collaboration across healthcare and life sciences analysts, where they can say, listen, I can't code, but I still need to understand my business. I still need to sanity check the work of my consultants. I would love to be able to give my team a starting point around my hypotheses around this specific disease area or drug category, and then pairing those needs with emerging Gen AI capabilities to launch an offering into the market that has really already helped so many end users and is already seeing adoption and engagement that we've just been thrilled by.
And what has been the right balance for you guys between really absorbing customer feedback versus your following your inner gut or vision about where the industry is going?
Yeah. I'll start by saying when we started Komodo, with the full stack thesis, with the idea that we could productize insights workflow, we were told by so many people, oh, you can't productize analytics workflow, or, oh, you can't possibly reduce a customer's reliance on consultants. That's not going to happen. That doesn't happen in healthcare. And I also think about the Henry Ford quote. If Henry Ford had gone around asking people what they wanted, they would have said, I want a faster horse, right? I think there's a couple principles here. Internally, we have so many people that have sat in the chairs of our customers, sat in those seats, and we have very strong hypothesis-driven product innovation initiatives. Externally, as you would expect, we're always doing market and customer-driven initiatives and validation of some of those hypothesis-driven initiatives. And then also externally, we're always looking at competitors, right? And so we have a team that's responsible for bringing together real-time insights on all of the above: our users, their workflows, pain points, unmet needs, so that we can map it against those frameworks. And when we think about the framework, it's really how big is the need? How does it help our customers? Does it help our customer-facing team win more? Does it impact our customers to buy more or partner more deeply with Komodo, to be more likely to renew their partnership with Komodo? And then we also assess, are we as Komodo naturally advantaged in any way? How does this further differentiate us from the competition? And last, and probably least, what is the degree of difficulty when we're thinking about this new innovation, this new feature, this new capability or offering that we want to bring to market.
Yeah, it makes total sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense. And in terms of your commercial strategy or your go-to-market strategy, Komodo caters a diverse range of stakeholders, right? From providers, payers, pharma, all of that. And so how having multiple stakeholders, how does Komodo tailor your go-to-market strategy to really, cater to the different needs and the
Absolutely.
different segments? That must
And
be a
that's
challenge.
that's a really important question, because if you think about the range of end customers that we're serving, we have multiple segments in life sciences, whether it be clinical operations leaders that are trying to figure out what sites and what investigators to engage with and whether or not they have patients that can be enrolled into trials. They have commercial teams that are trying to figure out, how do I launch this breakthrough treatment into market? They have health economics and outcomes researchers that are trying to do outcome studies on those assets. And then there's also so many customers outside of life sciences. We have patient advocacy organizations. We have academic research institutions like Stanford Hospital System, Stanford Medical School, as well as Robert Wood Johnson, University of Maryland School of Pharmacy. We have government, we have payers, we have providers. I think what's been really exciting for us is Komodo's platform is designed to address the unique needs of multiple personas within and across multiple segments by offering an improved workflow to generate data-driven insights across a multitude of patient journeys, right? And so you think about the examples. Payers are trying to understand and price risk. Providers are trying to understand what happens to their patients when they leave the proverbial four walls of their practices. Pharma companies are trying to figure out, how do I launch breakthrough treatments? Some of the academic institutions that I mentioned are doing long-term outcome studies on COVID. And so what we've created is an experience. We call it the Map Lab experience, where, the simplistic way of describing it is there's no code, low code, high code, right? The beauty of it is the no code side has been enhanced through capabilities and software like Map AI. And at the same time, you have your lower code environment where you can have people that don't know how to code at all that can go into a user experience that's delightful and say, hey, I want to figure out, how do I define this disease area? Can you help me? And the application will help them by pre-populating and suggesting ways to define that disease, all the way through to, I've now done the work as a business leader and I want to share that with my data scientists. I want to share that with my AI engineering team, and they can go into the platform, engage the underlying assets directly to really validate, refine, and enhance some of the work that's been done by, some of the other team members. And all of that workflow is transparent, shareable across the enterprise, across different personas, across different segments. And so that's been a really powerful lever that helps our customers.
So Komodo, it's 10 years since inception. But I would imagine, right now you're probably, targeting and catering to, as you mentioned, different personas, different segments. But I would imagine that, your VC firms and investors in the company early on would ask you to focus and, and select a beachhead market. Yeah. To start somewhere. Did you follow that approach, or did you follow a segment-specific approach? Were you following a persona-specific type of strategy? Because it seems to me that right now, maybe it's because you've been the company has been around for 10 years, yeah. But it sounds complex to target everyone, as you're growing a company?
That's a great question, Rodrigo. And I think focus is very important. When you think about what we did in years 1 through 3, everything was focused on one very specific segment within pharma enterprise, within life sciences. And so the segment was called medical affairs. And for us, it was an opportunity in a highly fragmented, high need segment of the enterprise for us to test out that full stack thesis and bring a solution to market that really brought to bear all of those capabilities: data, platform, insights, workflow. And the beauty of that is we had so much overwhelming interest, demand, engagement for that first application that we called Aperture, that we were then able to take those wins and really start saying, how do we scale that kind of capability, that kind of offering across the enterprise? And so we started attacking segment 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then, as you can imagine, what we realized was, wait a minute, there are so many opportunities outside of life sciences where the needs and the use cases are very analogous, right? So I'll give you an example. Outside of life sciences, there's CROs, clinical research organizations, and they're trying to help their life sciences customers figure out, where should I launch my study? Where should I enroll patients? What providers have clinical experience in this disease area? And the beauty of it is, by taking that expansive approach and the work and the solutions we'd already built for the life sciences clinical operations teams, we were able to take very similar capabilities and offerings that were already productized and bring them to other segments outside of life sciences. And then I think the really exciting part here is, we started with launching the first, second, and now we have a dozen different applications. And then what we observed was the same way that our application engineers were engaging our platform capabilities was the same way we could externalize those platform capabilities so that third-party developers could build their capabilities on top of Komodo. Going back to the theme we were talking about earlier around degree of difficulty, let's say you're a company that wants to do something in healthcare IT, that wants to build a product and commercialize a product for life sciences customers. Today, your thesis would be tested by figuring out, do I build out a data strategy team, a data strategy and acquisition team? Do I hire a bunch of SIs to put all of the assets together and build out a data lake? Do I hire IT consultants to help me figure out my data warehousing strategy? I'm going to go through that for what we did for the first 7, 8, 9 years before I can even begin the process of testing my thesis. Now, the beauty of it is we have so many partners that have made the choice to say, you know what? Komodo is a fantastic partner. They've built all these platform capabilities to make it easy for me to develop against their platform. And so instead of going through that laborious, time-consuming, expensive process that requires a lot of domain expertise, I'm just going to build and commercialize my offerings atop Komodo's platform and take it out to market. And so that's been a really exciting way for us to kind of see our offerings and our capabilities being embraced at multiple levels of the stack across so many different segments in a very scalable way.
Yeah, that makes makes sense. And how have you been able to successfully sell and take to market your products and solutions? I would imagine that as a B2B company, sales, partnerships, whether it's direct sales, inside sales, I don't know. Can you talk a little bit about what channels have you adopted to sell your products? What has worked and what hasn't worked?
Absolutely. I mean, for a company that's on the cusp of breaking 300 million in ARR, I would say we're using all channels, right? We're using all tactics. I will also say, we've learned a lot over the years because, to your earlier comment, we're selling into multiple segments, multiple verticals. We have offerings that are application layer. We have platform capabilities. We have data products. And so I think what's been really interesting for us is when you've grown as fast as we've grown, the years where you're growing over 100% year over year, you have to keep in mind, you're building a brand new company and team on top of the entirety of the pre-existing company and team for however many years that had been happening, right? And so I think for us, what we've seen is just the need to really measure the return on investment across all of the different channels, across all of the different resources. We've seen incredible successes using SDRs to help with lead generation. We've seen incredible successes with using digital channels in order to drive lead generation. And we've seen also incredible ways for us to scale the team efficiently by pairing essentially hardcore sellers with the domain experts that help them be successful with very knowledgeable, very challenging end customers.
Yeah. Okay. All right, that makes sense. So you have a portfolio of channels, and
Exactly.
measuring ROI.
That's right.
Initially, if you go back 7 years ago or 7-8 years ago, once you had product market fit, did you have one winning channel that you were betting, like doubling down to, because you knew that
Yes.
that channel was working?
Yes. Early days, we saw incredible success with direct sales, right? And the reason is because if you think about it, when you're trying to do something different, first of all, I don't think I shouldn't say this. It's very difficult to sell a seven-figure deal via a digital channel, right? Someone's coming to your website and saying, hey, Rodrigo, I come to the website and I'm just going to buy a $10 million deal with Komodo. That usually doesn't happen. I would also argue that for a company like ours that's really trying to convince our customers that there's a better way than the current way, the old way, it requires it's hard work, right? You're trying to convince a customer to say, I've trusted Web for a number of years as my consultant, and now I'm going to say, Web, I don't need you for the next, for the foreseeable future for all these other projects. I'm going to do it myself via software. Those kinds of changes are things that we found required a lot of elbow grease, right? It required a lot of strong personal work to make those happen. I think what's exciting for us is the convergence of macro trends, customer interest, customer understanding around the fact that maybe I can do it a different way and it will result in a better, higher quality outcome and create a velocity advantage for my organization. I think through all of those kinds of the convergence of our emerging capabilities paired with our customer push. Whereas I felt like 10 years ago, we were trying to push a very different behavior and a very different way of thinking onto the market. Now we're getting just as many inbounds saying, we heard that you helped make these 3 top 10 companies much more effective. We would love to learn more. And that's been a really encouraging dynamic that we've observed. But early days, absolutely. It was direct sales, really trying to push this novel way of thinking and doing their work.
Sales cycles in healthcare are notoriously long. How have you guys been able to motivate your sales teams and incentivize them in order to deliver the results that you're looking for?
Okay, how have we motivated and incentivized them? I think, first of all, the truism that incentives drive behaviors, that is 100% true. We have observed that every year that we've existed as a business. In the early days, we call all of our team members dragons because we're Komodo. In the early days, you'll have dragons that are so committed to the mission and candidly have differing levels of ownership relative to folks coming in at year 10. They will do what's in the best interest of the company, sometimes even at their own expense. We've seen that dynamic change and decrease with each new stage of growth and with each new cohort of dragons that we've brought into Komodo. And so that truism that incentives drive behaviors is so true, which really leads to the most important thing that you can do is figure out what you need to achieve as a company, align sales team goals with those corporate objectives, and then make sure that your incentives will drive the right behaviors, right? So if you think about enterprise SaaS, B2B, there are techniques and tactics that you can deploy from just an IC point of view that meaningfully shift sales team behavior to focus on multi-year partnerships, multi-year deals with our end customers. Those are the kinds of things where you really see, little shifts in the IC model that align sales team behaviors and objectives with company objectives can make a massive difference.
Yeah. And as you have scaled over the years, what have been the biggest challenges in scaling the company operationally? I would imagine, everybody talks about, the challenges of scaling, growing pains, as they call it. What has been the most challenging thing in scaling Komodo, and what have you learned, and what would you have done differently if you could go back in time?
Yeah. Um, I'll start with two things. The first one is going back to the earlier point. Years 1 through years 6, 7, 8, we grew north of 100% year over year every year. And building that brand new company on top of the pre-existing 4 years of work or 5 years of work or 6 years of work, that was really challenging. And it really led to us realizing that sometimes persisting legacy company design principles isn't the right move because they no longer serve your needs for the coming year, right? And so the example there is early days, we used to just say, hey, sales team, we just have to hit the number. So everybody go out, and however we hit the number is fine as long as we hit the number. What we started realizing, to the comments we were just having, is as you start getting more meaningfully engaged into larger deals with larger enterprise customers, you need that segment specific domain expertise to win, and persisting that model and the accompanying IC that goes with it to just say, hey, however we get there is fine. That's not going to work. Right. And so I think it does boil down to, and it is, every company does this, but you have to do your FY planning for the company year, for the coming year. You have to think about what are your goals. You have to think about how does that cascade to the respective functions in a way where they're still working together. How does that cascade down to individual dragons, and then making sure everything and everyone is aligned. That is increasingly challenging as you scale larger and larger. When you're 20 people sitting around a table at Series A, it's very easy to make sure everyone's pointed in the same direction because you're working on one MVP, going to one specific persona, and you are able to share the strategy and get aligned in real time. That becomes increasingly difficult when you're 700, 800 folks, distributed globally around the world, and trying to make sure everyone's pointed in the same direction.
What about alignment with investors and VCs as you have scaled? What are some of the lessons that you could share?
The same way that, I'll start by saying, first of all, we always say best dollars are customer dollars, right?
Yeah.
How much does it cost you to acquire customer dollars? Having said that, we've been really blessed. We have an incredibly long-term. We have investors that view us as doing some very important work that takes patience in order for the impact in market to be fully realized. And so, choosing the same way. I think a lot of founders go out and they look for investors and they hope that the investors choose them. I think we took this approach that said, hey, we want to find the best, the smartest, the most collaborative, the most patient investors that would understand what we're working on. It's not like Instagram. We're not going to have 18 people building an app that scales to billions of users and that you sell it for $1 billion overnight. That's not what this is. And so, we took this mindset and orientation around, let's find the right investors, the right board members to join us on this journey that will help us problem solve and that will help us, figure out what's needed to get to the next stage. And that really will have the patience to work with us as we go through, this 10, 15, 20-year journey as a team.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Investor alignment, super important, especially in healthcare, that you really need to have like a long-term view, a long-term horizon.
Probably the opposite of Instagram, right? Working in healthcare, enterprise B2B.
Completely the opposite. Absolutely.
Exactly.
What about data privacy and security? That's all over the place right now, all over healthcare. And how does Komodo ensure data privacy? And what have you guys learned in terms of how to stick to how be compliant with the regulations as well and all of that?
Yeah, I think first of all, going back to one of the earlier points, everything we do is within a de-identified construct, right? So at Komodo, we don't have to sacrifice data privacy in order to generate insights that can potentially improve outcomes for patients. And so we can take elements of de-identified data from thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of patients in aggregate that can power the next wave of insights, whether it's figuring out what therapeutics to invest in, whether it's figuring out what markets to go into. And you never have to reveal PII or never have to reveal patient level details at the individual level. And I think in order to have better outcomes, generate more value in healthcare, we have to facilitate data-driven decision-making. And at the same time, you have to do that safely. You have to do that compliantly. And so our platform is helping accelerate the adoption and use of de-identified patient data to leverage all of that while not including PHI in the insights or recommendations, right? And so we manage all of our patient-level data in a fully de-identified environment. We receive the data de-identified before it ever comes into our platform. And so that's one of many ways that we're enabling data-driven decision-making, insight generation, and remaining fully compliant.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Let me ask you the final question before we wrap up. And
Okay.
How does your customers measure success in terms of using Komodo's products? If I'm a health system or a life sciences company and I've been using your product for the last 2 years or so,
Yeah.
how would I measure success, ROI, or whatever KPI they use to determine I really like Komodo, it's truly helping my organization, I will renew a contract with you for another year or so?
Yeah. I'll start with, we talk about this all the time. You can't change what you can't see, analyze, or measure, right? To drive better health outcomes for underserved, understudied communities, as an example, you have to be measuring where disease burden sits in the population, who's getting reached for treatment, how are they being treated, is it standard of care, where diagnoses are lagging. I'll say this, on a per segment basis, the ways they define success tend to vary, right? So as an example, in clinical operations or with our CRO customers, so many customers are prioritizing health equity. So for us, when you've fully characterized 2/3 of the 330 million patients in your healthcare map on race and ethnicity features, it gives you the ability, the visibility, the transparency to say, hey, for this upcoming clinical study, can I find and reach settings of care that have more of those underrepresented patient populations that have historically not been included in my clinical studies? That's an example of a success metric that a clinical team would use in partnership with Komodo. Now, on the flip side, if you're a commercial team, as an example, and you're saying, I'm about to launch this new breakthrough therapy into this disease category that hasn't had a new therapeutic in over 20 years, I need to know, right? Am I aligning my performance against what we believed was the market opportunity? Where can I find patients that still aren't receiving therapy, new drug eligible patients? Those are the kinds of success metrics that they're using to find patients, find providers, engage the right settings of care. And so I think on a per segment basis, the success metrics tend to vary a little bit, but ultimately it's just about helping our partners achieve their business objectives more efficiently, more effectively, in a very transparent way.
Mm-hmm. And what's your definition of success from a retention rate metric?
Yeah.
So what do you tell your team, your sales team, like, hey, if we have 100 customers, I expect as the president of the company to have X retention rate. What's your bench?
Great question. So we have a lot of metrics, as you would expect, that we're constantly looking at. We have a lot of tactics that we're executing on. So we do QBRs, quarterly business reviews with our existing customers. We're monitoring NPS scores for all of our software users. We're literally monitoring all of the full story sessions for folks that are using our platform. We're doing qualitative client satisfaction assessments. We're doing one-on-one exec to exec meetings and check-ins with select key partners to make sure that we're all aligned and on the same page around where the partnership can evolve towards. I think the most important measure for us is net dollar retention, because at the end of the day, for us, it's a marker. It is a lagging indicator, but it's a marker that tells us year over year, is this customer renewing their relationship with Komodo? Are they expanding their relationship with Komodo? Because more often than not, if they're renewing and expanding with you, that means you're doing something right.
Okay. So you spend more time looking at net dollar retention than customer retention then?
That's our lagging indicator. And then we have all of those metrics that we're doing to try to forecast out how we're doing with those customers, to try to forecast out where that NDR will land.
Yeah. So the leading indicators that have strong correlation with the lagging indicator. All right. Webb, this has been fun. I enjoyed it. I learned a lot about Komodo, and congratulations about your success. And I think that you guys are doing very important work for the health industry. So congrats, and I wish you all the best. And also thank you to everyone that is watching and or listening. Thanks, and until the next time. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me.
Bye-bye.